The land did not welcome men anymore. That was the first truth Ethan learned each morning when he stepped outside his cabin and looked across his property. The soil lay cracked and pale beneath the rising sun, split like old scars that never fully healed. Grass struggled to grow. Fence posts leaned at tired angles. Held together by wire Ethan had twisted and retwisted so many times, it felt more like habit than repair. This was his ranch, small, forgotten, pressed against the edge of the frontier where maps thinned out and promises ended. It was not the kind of land men boasted about in saloons or passed down proudly to sons. It was land you stayed with because leaving required something stronger than hope. The well was running low again. Ethan lowered the bucket carefully, listening to the hollow echo as it dropped. The splash came later than it used to. Each time it took longer. Each time he told himself it would hold a little while more. That was how things were now, always a little while more. Once there had been neighbors, families who believed hard work could tame the dirt, women who waved from porches, children who chased dust devils across the road. One by one, the wagons rolled out. Deeds were signed. Land changed hands for less than it was worth. Some left for towns with railroads. Some left because their wives were tired of bearing children. Some left because they were smart enough to know when the land had already decided. Ethan watched them go without saying much. They asked him why he stayed. He never had an answer that satisfied them. He stayed because the cabin still stood. Because the fence, though broken, still marked something that belonged to him. Because leaving required a destination, and Ethan had none. At night, the ranch grew heavy with silence. The wind slid through the gaps in the fence, making a sound like something breathing where it shouldn't. It rattled loose boards and whispered through dry brush, restless and unsatisfied. Ethan lit the oil lamp and set it on the rough wooden table. The flame flickered, thin and stubborn, casting long shadows across the walls. He ate alone, always alone. Beans, bread, whatever the land hadn't taken yet. He chewed slowly, listening to the night. Coyotes cried somewhere far off, their voices rising and falling like questions without answers. He did not answer them. Sometimes he remembered what it felt like to laugh. The memory sat in him like an old bruise. Dull, distant, but still there when pressed. He remembered the sound of a woman's voice inside a house, the way a place could feel warm without fire. Those memories had no use here. Ethan cleaned his plate, set it aside, and stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung low and pale, washing the land in colorless light. The fence line stretched away into darkness, crooked and tired, much like the man who kept fixing it. He stood there a long time, hands resting on the porch rail, breathing in dust and cold air. He was not afraid of dying out here. That fear had passed years ago. What lingered was something quieter, existing without being needed, surviving without being alive. Inside, the lamp burned low. Ethan turned it down and lay on the narrow bed, boots still on. Sleep came in fragments, short, shallow stretches that never reached deep enough to rest anything that mattered. Then it happened. A sound cut through the night. Not the wind, not an animal, not wood shifting in the cold. It was deliberate, measured. A knock. Ethan sat up instantly, every sense awake. His hand moved on instinct, reaching for the rifle by the bed, though he did not lift it yet. The knock came again, soft, controlled, as if whoever stood outside knew exactly how loud to be. No one came out here by accident. He rose, boots thudding softly against the floor, and crossed to the door. The lamp cast his shadow long and thin against the wall, a man stretched between caution and curiosity. He paused with his hand on the latch. The sound outside did not belong to the land. It did not belong to fear. It did not belong to desperation. It belonged to intention. Ethan drew a breath, slow and steady, and opened the door. Whatever waited beyond it was not something the frontier had prepared him for. The gate creaked when Ethan pulled it open. It was an old sound, wood protesting movement after years of dust and neglect. He kept one hand near the doorframe, the other loose at his side, not reaching for the rifle, but not forgetting where it rested either. The oil lamp behind him cast a weak halo across the yard, barely enough to cut through the dark. She stood just beyond the gate, an Apache girl, not a child, not yet hardened into age. She was young, but there was nothing uncertain about the way she carried herself. Her hair fell dark and straight down her back, untouched by decoration. Her clothes were simple, worn, practical, suited for travel rather than comfort. No blood, no dust from a fall, no signs of panic. Most striking was her face. Her eyes met Ethan's without flinching. There was no pleading in them, no fear, no expectation that he would help simply because she stood there. She did not lower her gaze. She did not raise her chin in challenge either. She simply looked at him, steady as stone. Ethan felt the weight of that look settle in his chest. He scanned her hands first. Empty. No knife, no rifle slung behind her shoulder. He glanced past her into the darkness beyond the fence. Nothing moved, no shapes, no horses shifting their weight. The land lay still, listening. "State your business," he said finally. His voice sounded rougher than he intended, scraped raw by nights of silence. She did not answer right away. When she spoke, it was quiet, controlled, each word placed with care. "It's water." That was all. Not please, not help, not I'm hurt. Just water. The word hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had heard enough stories to know where this could lead. An Apache at the gate never came alone. Not in the way men believed. There were always rumors, always warnings passed in saloons and at trading posts. Apache meant trouble. Trouble meant rifles. Rifles meant graves. He could shut the gate, lock it, pretend the knock had never happened. By morning, the land would swallow the moment whole, the way it swallowed everything else. No one would know. He studied her again, searching for signs of deception. Her shoulders were squared but not tense. She stood as someone who had already accepted whatever answer came next. Not defiant, not desperate, patient. "How far did you walk?" he asked. She did not answer the question. Instead, she repeated herself, her voice unchanged. "Water." Something in that repetition unsettled him more than any demand would have. It was not insistence, it was certainty. Ethan turned his head slightly, listening. The wind slid along the fence line. Somewhere far off, a nightbird cried out once, then fell silent. The land waited. His thoughts moved fast, colliding with old warnings and newer instincts. He had no quarrel with the Apache, but he had no desire to invite one either. The ranch was barely holding together as it was. Any attention, good or bad, could tear it apart. But water was not a weapon. Water was survival. He stepped back from the gate and nodded once. "Wait." She did not thank him. She did not move. She remained where she was, eyes following him, unreadable. Ethan fetched the tin cup from the shelf near the door and filled it carefully from the jug by the table. The water sloshed low inside, less than he liked to see. He hesitated for a brief moment, then filled it a little more. When he returned, he did not open the gate wider. He passed the cup through the gap between the posts, keeping distance without making a show of it. She accepted it with both hands. Her fingers brushed the rim, steady and sure. She did not rush. She drank slowly, deliberately, as if each swallow mattered enough to be honored. A few drops escaped the corner of her mouth, darkening the fabric at her collar. When she finished, she lowered the cup and met his eyes again. No smile, no relief, no gratitude spoken aloud. Just a single nod. Ethan waited, unsure what came next. His body stayed ready, but his mind felt strangely quiet. She handed the cup back. "For the water," she said. Then she stepped away from the gate, turning toward the darkness beyond the fence. "Wait," Ethan said, the word leaving him before he'd decided to speak it. She stopped but did not turn around. The moment stretched thin. He did not know why he had called out. Only that closing the gate now felt heavier than opening it had moments ago. The land held its breath. Ethan stood there with the empty cup in his hand, realizing what he had done. A small thing, a simple thing, but it was a choice. And no one had seen it. Morning came without ceremony. The sun rose pale and thin over the land, its light revealing what the night had hidden: cracked earth, tired fence posts, the well standing like a sentry that had forgotten what it was guarding. Ethan had been awake long before the light reached the porch. Sleep had come poorly, broken by the memory of steady eyes and a single word spoken without fear. "Water." He stepped outside with a tin mug in hand, breathing in the cold morning air. The land looked unchanged, yet something in it felt unsettled, as if the night had shifted a line no one had bothered to mark. That was when he saw her. She stood near the fence just beyond the gate, where dust met shadow, not close enough to intrude, not far enough to pretend she had not returned. The Apache girl, Illa. He did not know her name yet, but the land seemed to recognize her all the same. She had come in daylight now, where there were no excuses left for shadows or misunderstandings. Her posture was straight, her hands empty. She waited unmoving, as if time answered to her and not the other way around. Ethan approached slowly. "You came back," he said. "Yes." Nothing more followed. No explanation. No apology for the night before. "What do you want?" he asked. She looked past him briefly toward the cabin. The well, the fence, the thin stretch of land he still called his. Then she spoke. "If you take me as your wife," she said, "this place will be left alone." The words landed without warning. Ethan stopped short. The morning air seemed to thicken around them, pressing against his chest. He searched her face for signs of jest, desperation, madness, anything that would soften the weight of what she had just said. There was none. "You don't know me," he said carefully. "I know enough. That's not how things work out here." A faint tightening touched her eyes. Not anger, not fear, but patience stretched thin. "This is how it works where I come from." He let out a breath through his nose. "You're talking about marriage." She shook her head once. "I'm talking about protection." There was no romance in her voice. No warmth, no plea for companionship. She spoke as someone stating terms for survival, as clear and unmoved as the land itself. "You would wear my name," Ethan said slowly. "Yes. And that's it?" "That is enough." The silence between them grew heavy. Somewhere nearby, a fence wire rattled softly in the breeze. Ethan felt as though he had stepped into the middle of a negotiation he had never agreed to attend. "Why?" he asked. She met his gaze fully now. "Because if I remain unclaimed," she said, "others will come. They will not ask for water." Her words carried no threat, only fact. Ethan understood enough of the frontier to know what she meant. An Apache woman alone was seen as unfinished business by both sides of the line. Neither protected nor untouchable. "And my ranch," he said. "If you accept," she replied, "no one from my people will cross your boundary. No claim will be made. No debt will be collected. You're offering me peace. I am offering you distance." That distinction mattered more than she knew. Ethan looked out over the land again. He imagined riders appearing on the horizon, armed men measuring his fence line with their eyes, officials who cared more about paper than people. Trouble did not announce itself here. It arrived already decided. "There's no love in this," he said. "No. No promise of a life," he added. She did not look away. "Only a roof that stands." He felt something tighten low in his gut. He had lived long enough with silence to know when a choice carried weight. This was not a question of desire. It was a question of responsibility. "And if I say no?" he asked. Ila's expression did not change, but something behind it settled, as if the answer had already been prepared. "Then I will leave," she said, "and I will not return." Where would you go?" "Anywhere that ends." The simplicity of it struck him harder than any plea would have. She was not asking to be saved. She was asking him to draw a line and stand by it. Ethan thought of the night before, of the cup passed through the gate, of how small that act had seemed at the time. This was not small. He understood then what she had not said aloud. If he refused, she would walk back into a world that had already closed its doors. There would be no gate the next time. No knock. Just consequences. The morning wind moved through the dry grass, carrying dust and the faint scent of something burned long ago. Ethan stood between the fence and the cabin, between the land he kept and the life he had never planned to share. He did not answer yet. But for the first time in a long while, the land was not silent. It was waiting. There was no wedding. No gathered witnesses, no borrowed dress, no spoken vows carried on hopeful breath. The decision settled between them the way dust settles after a long ride. Quiet, unavoidable, and heavy. Ethan did not announce it. Ila did not ask for permission. There was no moment where the land seemed to pause and acknowledge what had been done. The frontier rarely did. It simply watched and waited to see if a choice would hold. They stood at the fence line where the ground sloped gently toward the well. The morning was gray and thin, the kind that pressed cold into bone. Ethan reached out his hand. It was not a romantic gesture. It was a contract older than paper. Ila took it. Her grip was firm, steady, not eager, not reluctant, just certain. That was all. No ring changed hands. No promises were spoken. Only the understanding that something had shifted and could not be shifted back. The gate remained open. That night, Ethan did not lock the door. The latch hung loose, catching lightly in the breeze. He noticed it as he stepped inside and left it that way, though he could not have said why. It felt like an answer rather than an invitation. Ela crossed the threshold without ceremony. She set her bundle near the wall and said nothing. The cabin was small. One room, a narrow sleeping space set apart by a half wall, a table scarred by years of use. There was nowhere to hide here, and yet both of them kept their distance. She moved first. Kneeling near the hearth, Ila coaxed life back into cold ash. Her hands worked with quiet skill, practiced and efficient. The flame caught slowly, then steadied, filling the room with warmth that had nothing to do with comfort. Ethan watched from the table, not interrupting. He did not ask where she had learned to build a fire so quickly. He did not ask how far she had walked or what she had left behind to stand here now. Some questions did not belong to him yet. At dawn, Illa lifted the yoke over her shoulders and carried water from the well. She did not complain when the bucket came up light. She did not comment on the cracks in the earth or the way the rope bit into her palms. She simply did the work. Ethan fixed the fence. He did not stand over her. He did not issue rules. He worked as he always had, hammering loose boards back into place, tightening wire that refused to stay straight. When their paths crossed, they nodded. Nothing more. They ate in silence. Bread, beans, coffee gone weak from reuse. The sounds of chewing and the low crackle of the fire filled the space between them. It was not hostile, it was careful. At night, Illa slept near the hearth, wrapped in her blanket. Ethan took the bed. The distance was physical, deliberate, respected. They shared a roof. They did not yet share a life. Outside, the land paid attention. Word traveled faster than men believed. By the second day, riders slowed when they passed the ranch. By the third, glances lingered longer than they should have. No one asked questions. Questions came later, after decisions had already been made. Ethan felt the weight of it settle in his shoulders. This was what he had chosen. Not peace, not safety, only responsibility. He noticed small changes. Illa set water aside before the sun climbed too high. She swept the floor without being asked. She left the door facing east open at dawn and closed it again before night fell. Ethan adjusted without comment. He did not demand explanations. He did not test boundaries. He understood in his own way that control was not protection. It was the fastest way to break something fragile before it had the chance to stand. They spoke little. When they did, it was about what mattered. The weather, the fence, the well. Never the past, never the future. Once, as the wind rose hard against the cabin walls, Ethan paused at the door. The latch still hung loose. "Should I lock it?" he asked. Ela looked up from where she sat by the fire. "No," she said, "not yet." He nodded and let the question fall. That night, the wind howled through the fence line, restless and searching. The lamp burned low. Two shadows moved across the wall, never touching, never fully apart. Two people under one roof, bound by a choice, not yet bound by understanding. The land waited. So did they. The land did not change. The people did. It began quietly, the way most trouble did on the frontier. A rider who slowed too long at the fence line, a wagon that stopped just far enough away to watch. Conversations that fell silent when Ethan entered town for supplies. He felt it before anyone said a word. At the trading post, a man he'd known for years would not meet his eyes. Another spat into the dirt and muttered something about sleeping with the enemy. No one said Ethan's name aloud, but it clung to the air all the same. Traitor. That was the word they did not use, but meant. To the white settlers, Ethan had crossed an invisible line. He had brought an Apache woman onto his land and left the door unlocked afterward. In their minds, that meant weakness. Or worse, sympathy. Sympathy was unforgivable. They whispered that he was passing information, that he was marking trails, that trouble followed him now like a shadow that could not be shaken loose. Ethan bought his supplies, paid in full, and left without argument. He had learned long ago that defending yourself to people who had already decided was a waste of breath. On the ride back, he felt eyes on him from the ridge. Watching, measuring. The ranch no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a line drawn too boldly on a map. Ela sensed it as well. She spoke even less than before. Her movements grew careful, deliberate. When she carried water from the well, her gaze never lingered on the horizon longer than necessary. She did not hum. She did not rest in the open. At night, she sat closer to the fire. Once, Ethan caught her standing just beyond the fence at dawn, facing east. Her posture was still, her expression unreadable. When she noticed him watching, she turned away without explanation. It was not only the settlers who had taken notice. The Apache had not come. Not with words, not with warnings. But signs were there if you knew how to read them. Tracks that did not belong to cattle. Smoke seen once, then never again. A presence felt more than seen. Ethan knew enough to understand the silence was not mercy. To her people, Illa had stepped outside protection. She had not been claimed by the old ways. She had chosen a man and a boundary not sanctioned by the council. That made her dangerous, not because she had betrayed them, but because she had chosen something that could not be controlled. A woman without a tribe was unfinished business. One afternoon, Ethan found a mark near the edge of the property, stones arranged deliberately, not by wind or animal. Illa noticed it too. Her jaw tightened, though her voice remained calm. "They know where I am," she said. "Are they coming?" Ethan asked. "They are watching." "And the ranch?" She looked at him then, truly looked at him, as if weighing the cost of honesty. "The ranch stands because of you," she said, "not because of me." That night, Ethan sat on the porch longer than usual, rifle resting across his knees untouched. The stars were sharp and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a horse snorted, then fell quiet. No lawman rode this far out. No judge cared who stood where. There would be no help if things turned. Inside the cabin, Illa moved softly, tending the fire, setting aside water for the morning. She did not ask what Ethan planned to do. She did not offer reassurance. She had never promised safety, only distance. And now even that distance was closing. The ranch became a place people passed by rather than passed through. Riders stayed on the far side of the fence. Words traveled faster than wagons. Ethan's name was spoken carefully, like something that might bite if handled wrong. At night, the latch still hung loose. Neither of them suggested changing it. They existed between worlds now. Too close to the Apache to be trusted by the settlers. Too tied to the land to be welcomed back by the tribe. No law protected them. No chief spoke for them. Only the land remained, and even it felt uncertain. One evening, as the wind pressed hard against the cabin walls, Ethan finally spoke what had been hanging unspoken between them. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Illa did not answer immediately. She stared into the fire, watching sparks rise and die before they reached the chimney. "No," she said at last. "Do you?" He considered the question. Outside, the fence creaked under the strain of the wind. Somewhere beyond it, unseen eyes watched and waited. The ranch stood as it always had, small, stubborn, exposed. Ethan shook his head once. "No," he said, "but I know what it costs." Illa nodded. "So do I." They fell silent again. Two figures bound by a choice neither side would forgive. The land listened. And for the first time since the gate had opened that night, it felt like the world was drawing closer. Not to welcome them, but to test whether they truly belonged nowhere at all. The first sign came from the well. Ethan noticed it at dawn, when the bucket scraped stone sooner than it should have. The sound echoed up the shaft. Dry, hollow, wrong. He drew the bucket up and stared into it. The water sat low, barely covering the bottom, dark and still, as if it had decided not to rise anymore. He said nothing. By noon, riders appeared on the ridge. Not passing through, not lost. They stopped where the land dipped and rose again, just far enough to be seen, close enough to make a point. 3 men at first, then 5. They did not wave. They did not shout. They simply watched the ranch the way men watch something they intend to measure. Ethan felt the shift settle into his bones. This was not about Illa anymore. This was about the land. Water meant power out here. A working well could keep cattle alive, draw settlers back, anchor claims that paper alone could not hold. Men did not need to kill for that. They only needed you to leave. That afternoon, a stranger rode up to the fence. He was clean for the frontier. His coat fit well. His horse was strong and well-fed. He dismounted slowly, making sure Ethan saw every movement. "Fine place," the man said, glancing toward the well. "Better than most." Ethan leaned against the fence post, arms crossed. "Depends who's asking." The man smiled thinly. "Depends who's answering." They talked in circles at first, weather, travel, how hard times were pushing folks closer together. Then the man finally said what he'd come to say. "You've got land folks are interested in," he said. "Water especially." "And," Ethan replied, "and you don't have protection, no law, no town, no family." Ethan felt the truth of it settle heavily between them. "We can make it easy," the man continued. "You sell, walk away clean, start over somewhere else." Ethan looked past him, toward the ridge where the others waited. And if I don't? The man shrugged. Land has a way of emptying itself. That night, Ethan sat with his back against the cabin wall, rifle across his knees untouched. He knew what they wanted. Not blood, not trouble, just space. He could sell, he could leave, he could survive. Those options weighed on him like stones. Inside, Illa moved quietly. She did not ask what the man had said. She did not need to. She had lived long enough to recognize the shape of threat without hearing it named. When she spoke, her voice was calm. If you go, she said, they will take everything. He looked at her. The land, she continued, and the water, the space between. It will not stop here. You think they'll come after you? He asked. She shook her head once. They will not have to. Without land, there is nowhere to stand. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. Leaving had always been an option in theory. Now it felt like a surrender that would not end with distance. And if we stay, he asked. She met his eyes, steady as ever. Then they will test us. Silence followed. Outside, the wind pressed against the fence, pushing wire against post until it groaned. The land did not offer advice. It never had. Ethan stood and stepped onto the porch. The moon cast pale light across the well, the fence, the narrow stretch of ground that had become a battleground without ever firing a shot. He could picture it already. Men moving in, measuring, claiming, changing things that could not be changed back. This place would disappear quietly if he let it. Behind him, Illa waited, not pleading, not demanding, simply present. I didn't plan on dying out here, Ethan said. She nodded. Neither did I. He looked at the latch on the door. Still loose, still open. Staying meant danger, leaving meant erasure. He understood then that survival was not always about living longer. Sometimes it was about choosing what did not deserve to be taken. Ethan turned back toward the cabin. We stay, he said. Illa did not smile. She did not thank him. She only nodded once, as if the answer had already been accepted by something older than both of them. That night, the riders remained on the ridge. And for the first time, Ethan did not feel like prey. He felt like a line that would not move. They came at first light, not riding hard, not shouting warnings, not raising rifles. Ethan saw them crest the low rise beyond the fence just as the sun broke over the horizon. 5 figures, moving with the land instead of against it. Their horses stepped carefully, hooves quiet, as if noise itself was a choice they refused to make. Apache. They stopped well short of the fence. No one crossed the boundary. Ethan stood on the porch, the rifle resting against the doorframe behind him, untouched. His hands were empty. His posture was still. He did not wave. He did not call out. He waited. That, he understood now, was part of the test. The Apache did not come with war. There were no painted faces, no raised weapons, no challenge in their stance. What they brought instead was heavier. Law. Not the kind written on paper or carried by badges. The kind passed through generations, enforced not by threat but by memory. Honor did not need to announce itself. It simply arrived and watched. One of them stepped forward, older than the rest, scarred, his hair bound back, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He stopped just beyond the fence line and looked at Ethan as if measuring the weight of his breath. You opened your gate, the man said. It was not a question. Yes, Ethan replied. You gave water. Yes. The man nodded once, not approval, recognition. You did not ask who she was. No. Why? Ethan did not answer immediately. He could feel Illa behind him inside the cabin, still as stone. He did not turn to look at her. Because she stood at my door, he said, and I had water. The elder studied him for a long moment. You took her into your house. Yes. And you did not trade her, the man continued. You did not offer her up to those who came asking. No. The air felt tight now, stretched thin as wire. One of the younger men shifted his weight. Another rested a hand near his knife but did not touch it. Every movement was seen. Every hesitation counted. You understand, the elder said, that by doing this, you stand alone. Ethan nodded. I understand. Alone against settlers, the man added. Yes, alone against us. Ethan felt the truth of that settle in his chest. He had known it already. Saying it aloud did not make it lighter. Yes, the elder's gaze sharpened. You could have drawn your weapon, he said, when we arrived. Ethan did not look away. I didn't see the need. You could have made a bargain, the elder went on, given her up to keep your land. Ethan's jaw tightened. She came into my house. I don't bargain with that. The words hung there, unadorned, not brave, not defiant, simply stated. Silence followed. The Apache did not speak among themselves. They did not whisper. They waited. Then the elder stepped closer to the fence. "You were tested," he said, "not with words." Ethan said nothing. "Men talk easily," the elder continued. "They promise easily. They break both when fear arrives." He glanced toward the well, the fence, the land. "You stayed," he said. "You did not raise a gun. You did not sell what was not yours to sell." His eyes flicked briefly toward the cabin door. "You kept faith with someone who stepped across your threshold." Something shifted then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that Ethan felt it. Respect. Not approval, not alliance. Recognition. The elder turned his head slightly and spoke. Not to Ethan this time, but toward the cabin. "She has chosen her boundary," he said. "And so have you." Ela stepped onto the porch. She stood beside Ethan, not behind him. Her face was calm, her posture steady. She did not look at the men. She looked at the land. The elder studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "No claim will be made," he said. "Not here." The words were not a blessing, they were a fact. Then without ceremony, the Apache mounted their horses. No threats were spoken, no promises were exchanged. They turned and rode back the way they had come, their figures dissolving into the rising light until the land swallowed them whole. Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He turned slightly toward Illa. "They tested you," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." "And you passed," she added. He shook his head once. "I just didn't break." That was when she looked at him. Not as someone making use of his protection, not as someone standing on borrowed ground, but as someone seeing him clearly for the first time. On the frontier, courage did not always wear a gun. Sometimes it looked like a man standing still, refusing to betray what had been placed in his care. And that was when Ethan was truly seen. Nothing changed all at once. That was how Ethan noticed it had begun. The land remained the same, dry, stubborn, unforgiving. The fence still leaned where it always had. The well still demanded patience. If a stranger passed by, they would have seen only two people sharing a place out of necessity. But inside the days, something softened. It started with small things, the kind that rarely announced themselves. Ethan climbed onto the roof one morning when the wind tore loose another strip of tin. The sun had barely risen, and the metal was cold under his hands. He worked in steady silence, hammer ringing sharp against the sky. Below, smoke curled from the chimney. Ela tended the fire. She did not call out to him. She did not ask if he needed help. She simply kept the flame alive, feeding it carefully so there would be warmth when he climbed down. When he finished and stepped inside, sweat cooling on his neck, the room held heat. It felt intentional. Each morning, a cup of water waited near the door. Ethan noticed it the first time and said nothing. He drank it, rinsed the cup, set it back where it had been. The next morning, it was there again. Cool, full, unremarkable. He never asked why she did it. She never explained. They moved around each other with growing ease, learning the shape of shared space without crossing lines that did not need crossing. Illa rose before dawn, her footsteps quiet. Ethan woke later, to the sound of the door opening and closing softly as she stepped outside. They ate together without ceremony. Some days they spoke about work, weather coming in, fence wire running low, how long the well might hold. Other days they did not speak at all. Silence did not press on them the way it once had. It rested. At night they sat near the fire. The lamp stayed low. Shadows stretched and shifted across the walls. Ethan mended tools or cleaned his rifle without loading it. Illa stitched, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. Occasionally the wind howled against the cabin, but inside the air remained steady. They did not reach for each other. They did not need to. Once a storm rolled in hard and sudden, rain striking the roof with force enough to drown thought. Ethan moved without speaking, checking the beams, bracing the door. Illa placed buckets where the roof wept and held them steady. They worked like that, together without coordination, united without command. When the storm passed, the fire still burned. That was when Ethan understood something he had never named before. Love out here did not arrive loudly. It did not demand proof or declaration. It showed itself in endurance. In staying, Ela began leaving the latch loose at night again. Ethan noticed but did not comment. He simply made sure the lamp was filled, the door steady on its hinges. They shared long nights where words felt unnecessary. The crackle of the fire, the wind beyond the walls, the shared understanding that morning would come, and both of them would still be there. Once in the quiet between breaths, Illa spoke. "You are not afraid of being alone," she said. Ethan thought about it. I was, he replied, before. And now? He looked at the fire, at the steady flame refusing to die. Now I know the difference, he said. She did not ask him to explain. Another night, Ethan asked her a question he had held back too long. Do you miss it? He said. Your people? She considered before answering. I miss what was, she said, not what is. He nodded. That was enough. Days turned into weeks into something harder to measure. The land tested them constantly, broken boards, weak fences, thin water. But it no longer felt empty. They shared no vows. They made no promises, but each morning Ethan rose to find the water waiting. Each night, Illa found the fire already set. On the frontier, love did not look like longing. It looked like commitment without ceremony. It looked like two people choosing, again and again, not to leave. And that choice, made quietly and without witnesses, held stronger than any spoken vow. They stayed. That was everything. They came on horseback just after noon. Not settlers this time. Not riders circling the ridge. These men rode straight down the trail, dust rising behind them in a deliberate line. Two wore coats cut too clean for the frontier. One carried papers tucked beneath his arm. Another rested a rifle across his saddle. Not raised, but not forgotten. Authority had a posture, and this was it. Ethan saw them before they reached the fence. He did not call out. He did not go inside to fetch the rifle. He stepped forward and waited, boots planted in the dirt that had cost him years to keep. Ela stood in the doorway behind him. The lead man dismounted slowly, eyes already measuring the land. The well, the fence, the cabin. He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. Mr. Hale, he said, we've come to settle a matter. Ethan did not correct the name. Out here, names were flexible. Land was not. You're standing on territory now considered disputed, the man continued, unfolding the papers. Water rights, claims, protection concerns. Ethan listened without interrupting. There's been trouble, the man went on. Apache movement, settler complaints. The government wants order. And how does that concern me? Ethan asked. The man's gaze slid past him to Illa. You're harboring someone you shouldn't be, he said. Hand her over, and this land can be reassigned cleanly. You walk away with compensation. Silence followed. Illa did not move. Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressed down, heavier than any threat he had faced before. This was the choice no fence or rifle could delay. Or, Ethan asked. The man shrugged. Or the land becomes uninhabitable. Claims revoked. Wells seized. No one needs to get hurt. It was said calmly, reasonably. That was the danger of it. Ethan looked at the papers, fluttering slightly in the breeze. He thought of the well, how the bucket scraped stones sooner each morning. He thought of the fence he had mended again and again. He thought of nights spent sitting in silence, choosing not to leave. He could hand Illa over. The land would remain, on paper. He could walk away alive. Empty, but alive. Behind him, Illa spoke. If you do this, so she said quietly, they will not stop. The man turned toward her sharply. You don't get a say. Ethan raised his hand slightly, not to threaten, but to halt. She speaks here, he said. The man frowned. This is federal business. This is my land, Ethan replied, and she came into my house. The man's patience thinned. Think carefully. You're choosing between a woman and everything you own. Ethan shook his head once. No, he said. I'm choosing between standing and disappearing. He stepped aside just enough to place himself fully between the men in the doorway. I'm not giving her to you, he said, and I'm not selling this land. The air tightened. The man glanced at the rifle, then at the papers. He had expected anger, maybe fear. He had not expected refusal without spectacle. You realize what this means, he said. Yes, Ethan answered. It means I stay. The men waited for him to raise a gun. He didn't. He waited for them to shout. They didn't. Instead, Ethan did the smallest thing of all. He reached back and closed the gate. Not slammed, not locked. Closed. Sound was soft, final. The land seemed to hold its breath. The official stared at the gate, then at Ethan. Something shifted in his expression. Not respect, not fear, but calculation. Trouble was expensive. Trouble drew attention. And this man standing still, offering none of the reactions they relied on, promised too much of it. This isn't over, the man said at last. No, Ethan agreed, but it doesn't start today. The men mounted their horses. The dust settled behind them as they rode away, slower than they had come. Ethan stood where he was long after they disappeared over the rise. Ela stepped beside him. You chose, she said, Yes, he replied. She looked at the closed gate, then at him. You did not bow, she said. No, Ethan answered. I stayed. Sometimes the frontier was changed not by gunfire, but by a man refusing to move. And sometimes that was enough to shift the balance of the land itself. The land did not erupt after the men left. There was no retaliation, no sudden storm of riders. No lawman returned with louder voices and heavier boots. Instead, the frontier did what it always did after a hard truth had been spoken. It watched. Days passed, then weeks. The ranch remained standing, quiet, exposed, and unchanged. Yet something subtle began to take shape around it, something no paper or boundary could fully define. People started stopping again, not settlers looking to claim, not officials with documents tucked under their arms. Traders passed through, cautious at first, then steadier. An Apache rider came one morning alone, dismounted at the fence, and waited. Ethan stepped out. They exchanged no words. The rider left a bundle, dried meat, tobacco, and rode on. No one claimed the ranch. No one challenged it either. It became a place between places, a stretch of land where weapons stayed lowered, where water was shared without questions, where men crossed paths without pretending they had not seen each other. Peace did not arrive loudly. It arrived carefully. Ila was not taken. No one came to remove her. No one demanded she return. Her presence became accepted in the way the frontier accepted anything it could not easily uproot. She moved freely now, still watchful, still measured, but no longer hunted by silence. Ethan noticed how the land responded to her. The well, though still shallow, held steady. The fire burned warmer. The nights no longer felt endless. He was no longer alone. They never called what they shared a perfect marriage. There were no soft confessions whispered in the dark. No promises made against a future neither of them could see clearly. Some nights Ila slept near the fire, others closer to the bed. Some mornings passed without a word exchanged at all, and yet each day they chose the same thing: to stay. Ethan found purpose not in ownership, but in stewardship. The ranch was no longer a fortress to defend or a prize to protect. It became a responsibility, shared, lived, honored. Ila brought with her a different rhythm. She marked time by the sky rather than the clock. She knew when to conserve, when to give, when to wait. She taught Ethan to listen to the land instead of fighting it. He taught her how to mend what was broken without erasing what it had been. Together they learned what neither had been given outright: belonging. Not to a tribe, not to a government, not even to each other in the way stories like to claim, but to a life built from daily choices. The latch on the door remained loose. The gate was closed at night. Not locked, just closed. People understood the difference. On quiet evenings, they sat on the porch side by side, watching the light fade across the horizon. The land stretched out before them, scarred, stubborn, alive. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Neither felt the need to fill the space. One night, as the fire burned low and the stars sharpened overhead, Ethan broke the silence. I never planned for this, he said. Ila nodded. Neither did I. And yet, he continued, gesturing toward the land, the cabin, the life they had assembled piece by piece. Here we are. She looked at him then, not as someone seeking shelter, not as someone bound by circumstance, but as someone who had chosen to stand beside him when leaving would have been easier. This is not what people imagine, she said. A family. Ethan smiled faintly. No. She considered the word for a moment longer. But it is real, she said. He did not argue. Out on the frontier, reality mattered more than perfection. Families were not always born. Some were built through silence, through refusal, through the courage to remain when everything else urged retreat. The ranch did not belong to a side. It belonged to the choice made there. As night settled fully, the land exhaled. The fire dimmed. Two shadows lingered beneath the same roof, not merged, not divided, simply together. And somewhere beyond the fence line, the world continued to push and pull, to threaten and tempt. But here, in this narrow stretch of ground, held by stubborn hands and quiet resolve, a different answer had been given. The story did not end with certainty. It ended with a question. Would you have the courage to stay when the whole world tells you to walk away?